The stagecoach from Cheyenne arrives 3 days late, and smelling of everything it has passed through: dust, horse sweat, coal smoke from the rail depot at Laramie, and the particular sourness of 6 strangers sitting too close for too long in August heat. Ada Crane is the last one off. She steps down onto the packed earth of Harlan's Crossing with her traveling case in one hand, and her composure held together with the same quiet determination that has carried her through the last 4 days. Her dress is the better of the two she owns, a grey-blue calico that was once a fine colour and is now something closer to the shade of old river water. Her boots are worn at the left heel. The small brass brooch her mother left her is pinned at the collar, the only thing she is wearing that carries no apology in it. She looks at the town. One main street, false front buildings shouldering each other along a stretch of packed dirt, wide enough for 2 wagons to pass without courtesy. A general store with a barrel of brooms on the porch, a blacksmith shop with heat pouring from its open mouth, a saloon with its double doors propped open to let the air move, which it isn't. A building that might be a hotel or might be a boarding house. The sign has been weathered past reading. Beside the dry goods merchant, a smaller office with a hand-lettered board in the window. Harlan's Crossing Courier, Esther 1871. Nobody is waiting for her. Ada sets her case beside the front wheel of the stagecoach and stands still while the driver hauls luggage down from the roof and the other passengers find their people. A bearded man reunites with a woman who cries into his collar. 2 merchants in town clothes collect wooden crates without ceremony. A child runs at a grandmother's legs. The ordinary business of belonging, the kind that makes a stranger feel the precise dimensions of her own separateness. The driver looks at Ada. Ada looks at the street. "Waiting on someone?" he asks. "Yes," she says. He nods and walks away. That is all the conversation the West offers a stranger on a Tuesday afternoon. She had written twice to the agent, a Mr. Shelby Combs of Memphis, Tennessee, who had advertised his matrimonial services in the Commercial Appeal, with the confidence of a man who has never been held accountable for anything in his life. She had paid him $12. He had sent her a letter, then a train ticket, then nothing. No word forwarded to Wyoming, no date communicated, no indication that the man on the other end of the arrangement knew she was coming at all. Ada discovered this not from Combs himself, who was apparently dissolved into the continent like salt in warm water, but from the telegraph operator, a thin young man named Percy, who runs the wire office beside the post office and who, 2 days prior, had taken it upon himself to telegraph the Reardon Ranch when he saw the stagecoach manifest come through. Figured someone ought to know, Percy had told her through his window after she stepped off the coach. Sent the message Thursday morning. Got a reply same afternoon, said he'd come. So Colt Reardon knows she is here. He is simply not here yet. Ada picks up her case and moves to the shade of the general store's awning. The heat presses down like a physical weight, relentless and indifferent. From across the street, 3 men watch her from the saloon porch. One of them wears a black suit that cost more than anything currently for sale in this town. He carries a walking stick he does not appear to need, and he has a neatly trimmed mustache that he touches with one finger while he studies her, the way a man examines a transaction he has not yet decided to enter. Another one. His voice carries easily across the still air. He is addressing his companions, but at a volume chosen for the street. 3rd this season, if I'm counting right. They come from wherever it is they come from, and then they stand right there wearing exactly that expression. His associates provide the expected laughter. Word gets around eventually, the man continues, unhurried, almost philosophical. Reardon doesn't want a wife. He wants someone to cook and stay out of his way. Ada does not look at him. She fixes her gaze on the water barrel outside the blacksmith's shop and thinks about the $12 she no longer has and the $1.40 folded into her coat lining. She thinks about the return ticket she cannot buy. Her father had called the practice of not flinching dignity. Her mother had called it survival. Ada has decided the difference is mostly a matter of how much you have left to lose, and that either way, the face you show the world is a choice, same as any other. A woman emerges from the boarding house, broad in the shoulders, grey-haired, wearing a clean dress and an expression that reveals nothing. The careful neutrality of someone who has made a profession of sizing up strangers quickly. She looks at Ada's case, at Ada's boots, at the brooch pinned at her collar. You the Reardon bride? I am. Ruth Alcott, I run this establishment. A measured pause. Come inside. You can wait in the parlour, no charge. Ada follows her in. The parlour smells of lye soap and something floral that might be artificial. Dried lavender, perhaps, or a scented oil that has been in the cabinet too long. A horsehair sofa. A mantel clock ticking with maddening regularity. A window that faces the main street and frames the scene outside like a painting nobody asked for. Ruth Alcott pours water from a ceramic pitcher, sets the glass on the side table, and withdraws without another word. Ada drinks the water and watches the street. Two men cross below, both carrying rolled maps tucked under their arms. Their clothing marks them immediately as outsiders, suits too clean for fieldwork, boots too new for the dust, the particular alertness of men who are measuring something rather than living in it. One of them pauses at the mouth of the alley across the road and unrolls a portion of map against the wall, running a finger along what Ada cannot read from her distance. They speak in low voices, deliberate, consulting. Then they fold everything away and disappear into the building beside the cartographer's office. Ada watches the space they leave behind. She does not know what the maps mean. She files the image away alongside everything else she does not yet understand about this town. She is still turning it over in her mind when the hoofbeats come. Colt Reardon does not hurry. This is the first thing Ada understands about him, before she knows his voice, before she can read his face, before she has any frame for who he is. He arrives in the street at a pace that has nothing apologetic in it, nothing that acknowledges delay or owes explanation to anyone. The wagon is plain and strictly functional, built for hauling rather than ceremony. His clothing is faded at collar and elbow from sun and repeated washing, and his hat brim carries the specific bend of a man who has pushed through the same low doorway 10,000 times. But the horses tied behind the wagon are neither plain nor worn. Ada sees them before she sees anything else about him. Two, a deep bay and a steel grey, both clearly of quarter-horse blood, the kind of animals whose breeding shows in the architecture of their movement. Their coats have been brushed recently. Their tack is oiled and intact. They belong to a different world than the wagon they trail behind, and the man driving it, and the peeling paint on every building on this street. Ada tucks that contradiction somewhere careful in her mind and goes outside. He is standing beside the wagon when she reaches him, looking at her traveling case rather than her face. He is tall in the way that outdoor labor builds, not performance, just accumulated fact. When his eyes finally rise to meet hers, they are a pale green-grey, steady and unhurried, like the surface of still water that holds whatever light reaches it without giving any back. Miss Crane, Mr. Reardon. Neither extends a hand. He picks up her case, sets it in the wagon bed with the efficiency of a man who has made a decision and is carrying it out without ceremony, and climbs back to the driver's seat. He waits. Ada climbs up without assistance. The step is higher than she anticipated, and she has to pull herself up with one hand braced against the seatboard, her skirts catching briefly, but she manages without stumbling. He says nothing about it. She is more grateful for that than for anything else that has happened today. He clicks his tongue at the mule. They roll forward. At the edge of town, where the main street narrows and the buildings thin into scrubland, an older man with white hair sweeps the boardwalk in front of the cartographer's office. He looks up as the wagon passes. His broom goes still in his hands. He lifts his hat from his head, not the casual half-tip of a man acknowledging a neighbor, but a full and deliberate removal, held against his chest, the kind of gesture that belongs to a different register of respect entirely. Colt does not acknowledge it, but his jaw shifts once nearly imperceptible. Ada watches the white-haired man replace his hat and return to his sweeping. She turns back to face the road ahead, and she holds the image alongside the maps and the horses and the $12 that bought her a place on a stagecoach, and the name of the man now sitting 3 inches to her left. They travel mostly in silence, which Ada finds she does not mind. He tells her the ranch is 11 miles northeast, that he has worked the land 12 years, that the lean-to off the kitchen has a latch on the inside, and it is hers. He states these facts the way a man reads distances off a surveyor's stake, accurately, without ornament. She asks if there was once a garden. There was, he says. His eyes stay on the road. She asks nothing further. She looks at the country instead. The grass has burned gold in the August drought. The hills to the north lie low and bare against a sky so large it seems to press the earth down. Hawks cut wide circles on thermals over the ridgeline, unhurried as everything else in this landscape. A thread of green far to the east marks water. Cottonwoods, she thinks, following a creek she cannot yet see. The ranch appears at dusk, stone and timber, squared off and plain against the fading orange sky. A porch with a single step. Aswell pumped beside the kitchen door that shrieks like a disturbed bird when Colt works the handle to show her where it is. A red cellar door set at an angle in the earth, its frame warped from summer heat. Inside, a cast-iron stove, a table of rough-hewn pine, 4 chairs that don't quite match. A window facing south over the darkening pasture. A bedroom off the main room, its door standing open. And the lean-to off the kitchen, smaller, built from lumber that is newer than the rest of the house, the wood still pale where it hasn't weathered yet. The latch on its door is wrought iron, hand-fitted, solid. He built that room before he knew her name. Ada carries her case inside and sets it on the narrow bed. The room smells of fresh sawdust and something dry and faintly sweet, juniper sprigs tucked between the wall planks against the summer heat. She looks at the east-facing window. The hills are dark shapes against a sky going deep blue, the first stars pressing through. She takes her work dress from the case, hangs it on the iron hook beside the door. She has $1.40, a brooch she won't sell, and the name of a man who has spoken perhaps 30 words to her in 3 hours. The city she left is 3 days south, and 2 weeks of hunger behind her. There is nothing back there worth the fare. She presses one hand flat against the window glass. The surface is cool already, the night coming fast off the hills. Ada Crane does not make declarations. She is not a woman given to ceremony or sentiment in the moments that matter. She simply takes her hand from the glass, turns to the small room around her, and begins to consider what needs doing in the morning. The decision is already made in the place decisions are actually made, not in words, but in the body's quiet settling, the way a stone finds the bottom of clear water and stays. She is not going back. The ranch teaches itself to her in increments. Not because Colt explains it, he doesn't. He operates in the pre-dawn dark with the self-sufficiency of a man who has never had to account for his movements to another living soul, and he disappears into the property the way water disappears into dry earth, completely without ceremony, leaving only evidence that he was there. Coffee on the stove. A gate unlatched and relatched. A coil of rope moved from one peg to another, for reasons Ada spends 3 days puzzling out before she understands the logic of it. She learns by watching, then by doing, then by making the kinds of mistakes that teach more than getting it right the first time ever could. The hen house has 7 birds, 6 laying and 1 rooster who has decided, with the full conviction of a creature that has never been questioned, that Ada's left boot constitutes a personal offense. She learns to carry the feed bucket at her hip rather than in front of her, angled so the hens rush around rather than into her. She learns which nest the spotted red prefers and to check it last, because moving it first scatters the others before she has collected anything worth carrying. Small knowledge, the kind that doesn't travel but matters here, on this particular patch of ground, with these particular birds. The land itself is what she keeps returning to. Spring Creek runs along the eastern property line and then cuts north through the pasture. She follows it one morning while Colt is mending equipment in the barn. The water is cold, even in August, running clear over flat stones, fed from somewhere in the hills above that hasn't dried despite the summer. The grass on both banks stands knee-high and green, where everything else on the flat has gone gold and brittle. The soil here is dark and deep, the kind her father used to call patient, the kind that has been accumulating richness for decades and simply waiting for someone to ask something of it. She looks back at the ranch from the creek bank. A house, a barn, a hen house, a lean-to for tools. One man working 800 acres alone. No hired hands, no expansion. The fences are maintained, but not extended. The herd is modest, 40 head of cattle she has counted, spread across the north and east pastures. For land this well watered in this part of Wyoming territory, it is almost deliberately small. She files this observation into the same careful place she has been filing everything else. Ruth Alcott arrives on a Saturday morning, driving a small wagon at a pace that suggests she has nowhere urgent to be. Ida sees her from the neglected garden plot, a sorry tangle of weeds and collapsed stakes she has been meaning to address, and walks to the porch gate to meet her. "On my way to the Beaumont place," Ruth says, climbing down with the ease of a woman accustomed to doing everything without assistance. "Thought I'd stop." Ada makes coffee. It is the only thing she has to offer, and she offers it plainly. They sit at the kitchen table. Ruth's eyes move around the room with the practiced assessment of a woman who has run a boarding house for 15 years and can read a domestic space the way a tracker reads ground. She says nothing about what she sees. She asks about Memphis instead. The heat, the river, the particular weight of Tennessee summer, which she has never experienced but seems genuinely curious about. Ada tells her about the schoolhouse where her father taught, about the wide front porch of the house they had before the war rearranged everything. She does not tell her much. Ada is not a woman who gives large amounts of herself to anyone she has known less than 2 weeks. But she tells her enough that by the time Ruth's coffee is finished, there is something between them that feels like the beginning of familiarity. Ruth squeezes Ada's hand once at the gate, before climbing back into her wagon. As the wagon turns back toward town, Ada notices Ruth pause briefly at the end of the lane where it meets the road. A man stands beside the hitch rail there, hat low, posture easy, in the way of someone accustomed to waiting without appearing to wait. The exchange between them is brief, a few words Ada cannot hear over the wind moving the grass. And then Ruth climbs into her wagon and drives on. When the man glances toward the ranch house, Ada has the distinct impression that the conversation ended the moment she came into view. She files the detail away without comment. "You come find me in town if you need anything," she says. "Any woman alone out here ought to have someone she can speak to plainly." Ada watches the wagon disappear down the road. The morning is quiet around her, just wind moving the grass and the distant sound of Colt splitting wood somewhere behind the barn. The warmth of the conversation sits with her through the rest of the day, the sensation, small but real, of not being entirely without allies in this country. The trip to town comes midweek. Colt loads the wagon before first light with eggs and 4 dressed chickens to sell at the general store, and Ada sits beside him through the 9 miles of ruts and early shadow without speaking much. The sky goes from dark blue to the pale gold of new sun, and a line of cloud to the northwest suggests the weather may have opinions about the afternoon. Harlan's Crossing wakes slowly. The blacksmith is already at his fire. A boy sweeps the mercantile steps with the energy of someone who would rather be anywhere else. When they pass the land office, Colt's hands shift on the reins. It is a small movement, barely a change in grip. But Ada has been studying this man the way she used to study difficult passages in her father's books, returning to the same sentence until she understands what it is actually saying. She looks at the land office window. The white-haired man is not there. In his place, visible through the glass, sits a younger man with the particular tidiness of someone recently installed. Papers stacked with deliberate neatness, a new pen holder on the desk, the self-conscious arrangement of a person performing competence rather than exercising it. He is perhaps 30, city-groomed, and he glances up once as the wagon passes without recognition or greeting. Colt does not look at Ada. He guides the mule to the rail in front of the general store and sets the brake, and his expression when he climbs down is exactly what it always is: considered, closed, revealing nothing. He does not say a word about the land office. Ada does not ask. The fence along the north pasture begins to fail a week later. Ada finds the first break on a Tuesday morning. 3 posts in sequence with the wire lying loose at the base, the cuts clean and low where the grass conceals them until you are standing close enough to step through. Not one failure. 3, spaced 20 feet apart in the section that runs along the ridge where the cattle drift at night. She stands at the fence line and examines the cuts. Wire doesn't fail this way. Wire frays at stress points, at the clips, at the corners where tension accumulates over seasons. It doesn't part clean and low in the middle of a quiet stretch. She pinches a cut end between thumb and forefinger and turns it toward the light. Shears, or a very sharp blade. Recent work. She does not tell Colt yet. She looks instead. 2 days after the first break, she finds 2 more sections down along the creek bank. Different approach, same clean edge. She walks the entire north line on a morning Colt rides to check the upper herd and is not expected back until afternoon. By the time he returns, she has documented every cut and found, in the tall grass at the base of the ridge, 3 flattened patches of earth where someone crouched for a while, heel marks pressed into dry ground, and beside them, tucked near a fence post, 2 cigar butts, folded leaf style, dark tobacco with a distinctive pale paper wrapper. She has seen those same cigar butts in the glass jar on the counter of the general store. They are not common stock. Ordered specially, the store owner mentioned once in passing, for a single particular customer who prefers them and no others. Ada wraps the cigar butts in her handkerchief and puts them in the deep pocket of her work dress. She walks back to the house. She says nothing yet. The calf is found 3 mornings after the fence. A young one, not yet 4 months, lying still in the grass near the creek where it bends northeast, close enough to the water that the cause is plain without investigation. Colt crouches over the animal for a long time before he stands. His face, when he straightens, carries the expression of a man delivering a verdict he has already decided, but doesn't want to be right about. "Water," he says. Ada looks at the creek. The main current runs clear as always. But in the bend, where the water eddies and slows against the bank, a faint discoloration marks the waterline, a thin, chalky residue on the stones just below the surface, the kind that is not mud and is not mineral and doesn't belong to anything natural in this creek. Colt picks up the calf and carries it away from the water. Ada watches him go. She watches how he holds the animal, not with the detachment of routine loss, but with the tension of a man carrying something that has confirmed what he would have preferred to remain uncertain. "Accident," he says that evening at supper, looking at the table rather than her. Ada says nothing. She had seen his face at the creek bank. There are men who lie by saying things they don't believe, and there are men who choose the plainest available word because they are not yet ready for the conversation that lives underneath it. She understands the difference. She lets the word stand where he put it. The mare goes down on a Thursday. A roan, 7 years old, the steadiest of the 4 horses Colt keeps near the barn. Ada finds her in the morning corral with flanks heaving, legs braced wide, head low and swinging in the slow arc. That means the gut is turning on itself. Colt comes around the corner of the barn at a run and stops when he reads the mare's position. His face does the calculation fast. "Been like this long?" "Since before I came out. Maybe an hour." He moves to the mare's head, runs a hand down her neck, watches her chest work. Ada can see in the set of his shoulders what he already believes, that a horse down this long in a colic, this severe, is usually a decision, not a recovery. Ada has already gone to the kitchen. She returns with the largest pot filled with water she has set to warm on the stove and a lead rope over her shoulder. She does not ask permission. She takes the mare's halter and begins walking her a slow, deliberate circles around the corral, her hand steady on the horse's flank, reading the abdomen with her palm. Colt watches from the fence rail. It won't help. It might. Ada keeps walking. "My father saved a draft horse this way back in Memphis, kept her moving, worked the belly, warm water at intervals. The gut has to unknot on its own terms. Lying down seals it." He doesn't argue further. He stays at the rail, not helping, not leaving, and watches with the arms-crossed stillness of a man who has already mourned something and is waiting to be corrected. For 2 full hours, Ada walks the mare. She returns to the kitchen 3 times for warm water, offering small amounts against the horse's lips rather than allowing her to drink freely. She works her hands in firm, steady strokes along the mare's left side, the pattern her father demonstrated on a hot July afternoon when Ada was 12 years old and certain the world was ending over a horse. The roan resists at first, then grudgingly complies. Then, deep in the 3rd hour, something shifts. A long, low rumble from the animal's belly, the sound of pressure finally releasing its grip. The mare lifts her head. By noon she is standing steady, breathing even, nosing at the feed Ada holds out on a flat palm. Ada leans her forehead briefly against the mare's neck. Her arms ache from shoulder to wrist. Her boots have worn a ring in the corral dust. When she straightens and turns, Colt is still at the fence. He has been there through all of it, though she stopped tracking his presence somewhere in the second hour. He looks at the mare, then at Ada. His expression is unreadable in the specific way of a man who is feeling something he has not yet decided what to do with. He says nothing. That is the afternoon. In the morning, Ada is still gathering herself from sleep when the smell reaches her. She lies in the lean-to in the early dark and identifies it without moving. Coffee, already made. In 2 weeks, she has not once come out to find it done. She is always first to the stove, always the one who starts the fire and measures the grounds and waits. This morning the boots have already come and gone before she woke, and the coffee sits on the back burner still hot, with no note, no explanation, no acknowledgement that it means anything at all. She pours a cup and stands at the south window. Colt is at the yard fence below, working a post-hole bar on something that could easily have waited another week. His back is to the house. He does not look up. Ada drinks her coffee in the early quiet, and outside a meadowlark runs its full song through twice from somewhere in the north grass, bright and carrying, far further than the sound has any reason to travel in the still morning air. Price arrives the following Tuesday, riding alone. Ada sees him from the kitchen window while she is pressing wrinkles from Colt's second shirt on the small board near the stove. Black suit, walking stick hooked over the saddle horn, that particular ease of a man who believes his presence is a favor to whoever receives it. He stops at the yard gate and waits. Colt comes out from the barn. He stops on the porch step. He does not walk to the gate. She cannot hear the words from the window, only the cadence of them. Price's voice carries the measured, pleasant rhythm of a man who has rehearsed an offer so many times it sounds like conversation. Colt's responses come brief and widely spaced, without the movement of negotiation. The exchange takes perhaps 4 minutes. Price tips his hat with the smile of a man who intends to return, wheels his horse, and rides back toward the main road. Colt goes back into the barn without looking toward the house. Ada sets the iron flat on the board and watches the road long after Price is gone from sight. She thinks about the 2 men with maps on her first day in Harlan's Crossing. She thinks about the creek running cold through the east pasture, and the chalk residue on the stones and the dead calf, and the cigar butts folded in her handkerchief. She picks up the iron. She finishes the shirt. Some things you carry until you understand their full weight. Then you decide what to do with them. She chooses a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks after arriving, when the supper dishes are done and the light through the kitchen window has gone the particular amber of late summer, settling toward dark. Colt sits at the table with a length of harness leather he has been oiling in silence for the better part of an hour. The smell of the oil sits in the room, animal and mineral together, the scent of maintenance, of things kept from failing through attention. Ada brings the handkerchief from her dress pocket and sets it on the table between them. She unfolds it without ceremony. 2 cigar butts, pale wrapper, dark tobacco. She sets them on the cloth and smooths the edges flat. Then she tells him. The fence sections, all of them with location and spacing. The clean cuts, uniform angle, consistent depth. The boot impressions in the dried grass at the base of the ridge. The dead calf and the chalk residue she observed on the stones in the creek bend. The pattern of it, laid out plainly in the order she discovered each piece, the way her father taught her to present an argument. Evidence first, conclusion after, nothing inflated and nothing left out. Colt listens without moving. The harness stays in his hands, but his hands go still. When she finishes, the kitchen holds the kind of quiet that has weight to it. He looks at the cigar butts for a long moment. Sold at the general store, she says. Special order. 1 regular customer. He already knows. She can see it in the set of his jaw, not surprise, but the particular tension of a man who has been watching something build from a distance and is now watching it arrive. I'll handle it, he says. I know you will. I thought you should have everything I'd found. You should have come to me when you found the first cut. I wanted to be certain before I said anything. A pause. I am certain now. He pushes back from the table and goes to the window. His back is to her. A position she has come to understand is not dismissal but processing, the way some men need the horizon to think clearly. She waits. Outside, the evening star has appeared above the ridge line. This isn't your matter to carry, he says finally. It became my matter when I started living here. That's not what I mean. He turns. His voice has the careful evenness of a man choosing each word for precision rather than effect. Price doesn't make clean moves. You put yourself in his sight, you stay there. Ada looks at him steadily. I already am in his sight. That happened the day I stepped off the stage. He has no answer for that because it is plainly true. He picks up the harness from the table and goes to hang it by the barn door, which is as close as Colt Reardon comes to ending a conversation he hasn't won. Price finds her inside the general store on a Friday, 10 days after that conversation. She has come for flour and a pound of salt, and a spool of linen thread, the ordinary materials of ordinary maintenance. The store is not empty. Mrs. Calloway is at the fabric counter, and the clerk's boy is stacking canned goods near the back. But Price positions himself at the end of the flour barrel in a way that makes the space feel private. His walking stick is hooked over his forearm. He smells of tobacco and something imported and sweet, entirely out of place on this street in this town. Mrs. Reardon. He uses the name like a man trying a key in a lock he is not sure fits. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Wendell Price. Ada places her flour on the counter and waits for the clerk. I represent certain interests in the development of this territory, he continues pleasantly. Transportation interests, primarily. The kind that tend to improve life considerably for the communities they pass through. A brief pause. And the individuals willing to facilitate that passage. Is there something you need from the store, Mr. Price? I need nothing from the store. His voice lowers just enough. The pleasantness remains, but something beneath it sharpens, like a blade kept inside a leather case. I have a proposition for you, Mrs. Reardon. A private one, which I think you will find worth considering. The Reardon property represents a significant obstacle to a project of considerable regional importance. Mr. Reardon is a stubborn man. But a woman of your intelligence, a woman who came to Wyoming territory with, I understand, very little in the way of resources, might see the practical wisdom in a different arrangement. Ada does not look at him. She looks at the clerk, measuring flour into the paper sack. I am prepared to offer you $300, Price says. The number lands in the air between them. In exchange for your sustained encouragement of Mr. Reardon's cooperation, you would leave with means, an independent start, wherever you chose. The flour is measured. Ada pays for her goods. She picks up her parcel, turns and looks at Price directly for the first time since he began speaking. She keeps her voice at the same register as the rest of the conversation, steady, quiet, the indoor voice of a woman in a public place. I think you have mistaken me for someone with a price. She walks out. Her hands are perfectly steady until she reaches the wagon, where she grips the seatboard hard enough to feel the grain of the wood against her palm. She breathes the August air, dust and hay and horse and the faint iron smell of the water trough, and waits for her heart to find its normal pace. $300. The number is not insignificant to a woman who arrived with $1.40. The fact that she knows its weight and chose without hesitation anyway steadies something in her that the encounter had unsettled. She tells Colt that evening, all of it, word for word, the way she remembers it. He listens. His supper goes untouched. When she finishes, he is quiet for what feels like a full minute, the particular silence of a man containing something that would rather not be contained. You will not go to town without telling me first, he says. Not a question. Not an ultimatum either. Just a fact delivered in the same tone as the distance to the ranch or the depth of the well, information he considers necessary. Ada looks at him across the table. She understands what this is. Not control, not the particular smallness of men who need women to be smaller. This is a man who has seen something threatening move closer to something he is responsible for, and who is asking, in the only language he reliably speaks, for the ability to account for her safety. Agreed, she says. Something in his face shifts, barely, the way a door shifts when a latch is released. He picks up his fork. The arrangement is made. No ceremony, no elaboration, just two people deciding quietly to move in the same direction. The storm comes in off the northern hills on a Wednesday night 3 weeks later. The kind of storm the territory produces in September, like a reminder of what it is capable of. Not rain so much as pressure. A sustained assault of wind and water that tears at anything that has grown complacent in the months between. By midnight, the sound has moved from weather to something more structural, and by the time the sky goes grey with dawn, the east wall of the barn has partially given way. Colt is out before first light. Ada follows 20 minutes behind him, dressed for work, her hair pinned close against the wind that hasn't fully settled yet. The damage is significant. A section of the east wall and part of the loft floor above it, boards torn loose and scattered in the yard like the aftermath of something deliberate. 3 of the wall supports have pulled free at the base, where the foundation timber had been sitting in saturated ground. They move wood for 2 hours. Ada stacks what is salvageable, hauls debris clear of the structure, and holds boards in position while Colt drives spikes with the methodical rhythm of a man taking back what the weather took. The work is straightforward and exhausting, and they do it side by side without needing to speak about who does what, which is its own kind of progress. It is Ada who goes to inspect the floor damage where the loft boards have pulled up. The support joist beneath the northwest corner has cracked cleanly at midspan. Weight from the collapsed loft came down at the wrong angle, and the floor planks in that section have lifted and scattered. Ada is moving the last of them when one pulls free and reveals the gap beneath. She sees the box immediately. Metal, flat-lidded, the size of a ledger. Dark with age, but intact. No rust through the seams. Beside it, visible where the lining paper of the floor cavity has come loose, a bundle of envelopes held with a faded ribbon, letter-sized cream stock, the edges browned and soft from years in a dry, dark space. Ada crouches. She looks. The top envelope faces up. The address is written in a hand she doesn't recognize, firm, eastward slanting, careful. Sent to Henry Reardon, Reardon's Spring Ranch, Wyoming Territory. The return stamp, pressed in purple ink now faded to near gray, reads, United States Land Office, Albany, New York. The date on the postmark is October 1866. Beneath it, 3 more envelopes in the same hand, same origin, spanning 1866 to 1868. Ada does not open them. She does not remove the box. She presses the corner of the floor lining back where it came from, replaces the planks in the order she removed them, and straightens up slowly. Through the gap in the east wall, she can see Colt driving the last spike into the repaired support timber. His back to her, absorbed in the repair. Henry Reardon, the father he has never mentioned. Federal land correspondence spanning at least 2 years. A box hidden under the floor of a barn that looks poor and works only a fraction of what the land could carry. She carries nothing out. She says nothing. But the pieces she has been gathering since the day she arrived, the blood horses trailing a plain wagon, the white-haired man's lowered hat, the men with maps in the street, Price's $300 offer for her influence over a rancher he claims is simply in the way. Those pieces arrange themselves into a new shape. Not a complete picture yet, but a shape. She walks back to the house to start the noon meal. The wind has dropped to a murmur off the northern hills, and the light through the broken cloud is the clean pale gold that comes after a storm passes. Everything washed and precise and temporarily honest. What Ada does not know, riding into town with Colt the following Saturday for supplies, is what has happened inside the land office that week. The young man at the desk, recently installed, city-groomed, answering to Price rather than to any legitimate appointment, has spent 3 deliberate days doing one thing. He has prepared a document, a single page, properly formatted in the style of a formal declaration of intent, carrying all the correct procedural language of a voluntary property transaction. It names Colt Reardon as the willing seller of the Reardon Spring Ranch parcel, or 200 acres, to the Transcontinental Land Company, for a sum listed as fair consideration. At the bottom, in a hand studied from samples Price has collected over 3 years of watching this property from a distance, is Colt Reardon's signature. The document is filed on a Thursday afternoon, recorded in the ledger, dated, stamped. Colt will not know it exists for 10 days. By then, depending on which judge Price reaches first, the 30-day contestation window may already be more than half gone. The wagon rolls back through Harlan's Crossing in the late afternoon, past the land office with its clean window and its new occupant. Ada watches the building as they pass. The man inside does not look up from his desk. His pen moves steadily across a page with the industry of someone who believes the work he is doing is invisible. Ada watches the window until the wagon carries her past it. She does not yet know what she is looking at. But she is looking. She tells Colt she is going to town on a Tuesday morning, the same way she has told him every time since the arrangement between them was made, plainly while he is at the stove before the day has properly started. He nods without turning around. She takes the agreement in his silence and puts on her good boots. The ride in is 9 miles of familiar road by now. The hills to the north have lost some of their summer severity. September has begun to pull the color out of the grass in a way that is almost beautiful, if you can separate it from what it means about what is coming. She keeps the mare at an easy pace and thinks about what she is looking for and how she will ask for it, without revealing the full shape of the question. The Harlan Courier office is the last building before the gap that marks the edge of town proper, a narrow storefront with print ink smell that reaches the street before you open the door. The proprietor is a compact man named Aldous Foster, who wears his spectacles on a cord around his neck and keeps his office with the organized intensity of someone who considers every edition he has ever printed a matter of permanent record. Ada has spoken to him twice in passing. He has the look of a man who values precision and would respond well to a direct question. She tells him she is looking for the original matrimonial advertisement, the one Colt placed in the spring. A practical matter, she says. She wants to know the exact date it ran for her own records. Foster nods, pulls down the 1874 spring volume from the shelf behind his desk without hesitation, and sets it on the counter for her. He returns to his compositing table. She thanks him and opens the volume. She finds the advertisement in the March issue, 3 lines in the personal notices column. Rancher, Wyoming Territory, seeks capable woman for marriage. Plain speech preferred. Inquire through Harlan's Crossing Courier, care of C. Reardon. She reads it once. It is exactly what she expected and tells her nothing she didn't know. She closes the 1874 volume and looks at the shelf. The bindings run back to 1871 when the paper was established. Before that, 1869-1870, loose issues bundled and tied with twine on the lower shelf. Ada considers the twine-wrapped bundles for a moment. Then she says to Foster's back that she noticed the paper seemed to have some history in the territory even before it was formally established. She wonders if they had covered the early railroad surveys at all. She is simply curious, she adds, about the country she has come to live in. Foster turns from his compositing table with the expression of a man who has been given an opening he did not expect and considers it a gift. He brings her the 1869 bundle himself. The article is in the August issue, page 2, left column. The headline reads, Survey Commission reports on Western Extension route. Water access points identified as primary infrastructure concern. Ada reads it standing at the counter. The language is the careful, impersonal prose of a newspaper reporting technical findings, distances, gradients, resource assessments. She skims the first 3 paragraphs, which concern elevation tolerances and the load capacity of provisional bridges. Then the 4th paragraph opens with a sentence that lands in her chest with the particular weight of something she has been moving toward without knowing her destination. Among the most significant natural features identified by the Commission along the proposed northern corridor is the water source known locally as Reardon's Spring, a permanent creek fed from the high hills of the northeastern section, producing volume and consistency unmatched within 30 miles in any direction. Commission engineers note that without access to Reardon's Spring, the cost of providing adequate water infrastructure for the northern extension would render the project economically unviable in its current form. Ada reads the paragraph twice. She reads it a 3rd time. The creek that runs cold through the eastern pasture in August, when everything else in this part of Wyoming is dry. The creek that makes the grass on its banks stand green while the flats go to dust. The creek that Price has been trying to reach for 3 years by purchasing a ranch that has been deliberately maintained to look like it is worth far less than it is. The box under the barn floor, Henry Reardon, Land Office correspondence from 1866, the year after the war ended, and the government began issuing federal land grants to settlers who had held territory through the conflict. The blood horses trailing a plain wagon, the white-haired land clerk's lowered hat. $300 offered to a woman, price correctly assessed, had arrived with almost nothing. because $300 would not touch the actual value of what he was trying to obtain for it. The shape that has been assembling itself since the day she arrived is complete now. She thanks Foster for the bound volumes, purchases a copy of the current week's edition she does not need, and walks out into the September morning air. She is crossing toward the telegraph office when she sees Ruth Alcott. Ruth is coming out of the dry goods store on the opposite side of the street with a basket over one arm, walking at the unhurried pace of a woman with nowhere pressing to be. She sees Ada, raises a hand in greeting, and her expression does the small, warm rearrangement that Ada has come to associate with the older woman over the weeks of their acquaintance. The look of someone genuinely pleased at the encounter. Ada raises her hand in return and keeps walking toward the telegraph office. She has not yet processed what she will do with what she knows about Ruth. There is not enough evidence, not yet. Only the fact that Price has known things he should not have known, and that the only person outside the ranch who has known Ada's movements has been Ruth. That is a thread, not a certainty. Ada does not act on threads alone. But she does not stop to talk this morning. She has somewhere to be. Percy, the telegraph operator, is young and serious in the way of young men given early responsibility they intend to grow into. He looks up when Ada comes through the door, recognizes her from her arrival day, and straightens at his desk. "Mrs. Reardon, something I can help you with? I need to send a telegram," she says, "to the United States Land Office in Cheyenne." She had composed the message in her head on the walk from the courier office. She dictates it now, measured, precise, with the clarity her father had drilled into her from childhood. Say exactly what you mean and nothing beside it. The message names the Reardons' Spring Ranch parcel. It names Henry Reardon's land grant of 1866 and requests urgent verification of its current status and federal validity. It describes the forged document of intent to sell filed at the Harlan's Crossing Land Office by a recently installed and unauthorized land clerk. It describes the convening of a property auction without proper contestation period or legal notification to the title holder. It requests immediate response and federal intervention if the grant is confirmed valid. At the bottom, she gives her name. Ada Crane Reardon. She does not use Colt's name. She signs it herself. Percy writes it out carefully, counts the words, names the cost. Ada pays from the folded money in her coat lining. She watches him key the message through, the rapid, precise percussion of the instrument that has always seemed to her like a kind of compressed language, everything urgent, reduced to its smallest necessary form. "When will there be a response?" "Line to Cheyenne is direct," Percy says. "If someone's at the office, same day, tomorrow at the latest." Ada nods. "I'll come by tomorrow morning." She rides back to the ranch in the early afternoon, the sky ahead of her carrying the first thin clouds of approaching autumn. The hills are quiet. A hawk works the ridge to the north. The mare's hooves find the road with the easy familiarity of a horse that knows the way home. She tells him after supper. The dishes are cleared. The lamp is burning at the center of the table. Colt is in his usual chair with his hands resting flat on the table surface, the posture he settles into when he is prepared to hear something he may not want to hear, which Ada has noticed he does on instinct, as if his body understands before his mind does that certain conversations require him to be still. She starts at the beginning. The box under the barn floor, the discovery she has been holding since the storm. She describes what she saw without apology for having seen it, and without drama, because the facts carry enough weight on their own. The land office envelopes, Henry Reardon's name, the date spanning 1866 to 1868. Then she tells him about the courier office, the 1869 article, the paragraph about Reardon's spring and the northern rail extension, and the engineer's assessment that without that water source, the entire project was economically impossible. Then she tells him about the telegram she sent. She watches his face through all of it. He is a man whose face does not move easily, but she has spent 2 months learning to read what moves beneath the surface, the muscle at the jaw, the shift of pressure behind his eyes, the way he breathes when something confirms what he already feared. He listens to the box and the article with the controlled stillness of a man receiving information he has been dreading since before she arrived. He listens to the telegram with something that is not quite surprise, more like a man watching a choice he would have made himself being made without him, and not being certain what he feels about that. When she finishes, the lamp between them burns without a flicker. The house is quiet. Colt pushes back from the table. He goes out through the kitchen door without speaking, and Ada hears his boots cross the porch and descend to the yard. She sits with the lamp. She does not follow. He is gone for perhaps 10 minutes. When he comes back, he is carrying the metal box from beneath the barn floor. He sets it on the table between them. He looks at it for a long moment, the way a man looks at something he has been avoiding for a long time and has finally run out of room to keep avoiding. He opens it. Inside, the envelopes Ada had seen from the outside, and beneath them a document folded in thirds and wrapped in oilskin. The wrapping of a man who understood when he put it here that he was storing something he intended to keep for a very long time. Colt unwraps it with the careful movements of ceremony, though he would not call it that. The Federal Land Grant, issued by the United States Land Office, Albany, New York, in the name of Henry James Reardon, October 14, 1866. 1,200 acres in Wyoming Territory, including all water rights pertaining to the creek, designated on the survey map as Reardon's Spring, signed by the Land Commissioner, stamped with the federal seal, still precise after 8 years, in an oilskin wrapper in a metal box under a barn floor. He sets it on the table between them. He does not explain why it has been hidden. He does not explain what his father told him or what he decided for himself in the years since. He does not explain any of the choices that led to maintaining a ranch below its capacity and driving modest wagons behind horses that cost more than the wagon was worth. The document explains itself, and the man beside it explains himself by the way he has handled it, and Ada does not need a speech to understand either one. She looks at the grant. She looks at him. How long has Price been after it? Since my father's last year, Colt says. 3 years before I sent for anyone. Ada looks back at the document. 8 years of this man keeping one piece of paper safe in the dark, while a city-groomed representative of a railroad company tried every approach available to separate him from it. 8 years of deliberate smallness, the plain wagon, the worn shirt, the ranch maintained at a fraction of its potential. As camouflage against a threat he could not legally fight alone. The response from Cheyenne will come tomorrow morning, she says. He looks at the lamp. He nods once. He folds the grant back into its oilskin with the same care he used to open it. He does not put it back in the box. He carries it inside to the bedroom, to wherever a man keeps the thing he trusts most, and when he returns to the kitchen, he pours 2 cups of coffee without being asked and sets one in front of her. They sit with the lamp between them. The night outside is fully dark, the first cold breath of autumn moving through the gaps in the window frame. He does not thank her. He does not explain anything further. He sits with his coffee and the particular quality of silence that is not empty, the silence of a man who has, after a long time of carrying something alone, put it down in the presence of another person and found that the room did not fall. Ada drinks her coffee. Through the kitchen window, the stars above the ridge are sharp and numerous, the way they only get when the air has turned and the summer haze has finally lifted. The telegram arrives on a Thursday morning, as Percy had promised. Ada is at the telegraph office when it comes through. She had ridden in early, before Colt was finished with the horses, leaving word with him the way they had agreed. Percy tears the strip from the machine with the focused care of a man who understands that the words passing through his hands are not his business, and who handles them with corresponding respect. He passes it across the counter without reading it aloud. She reads it standing at the window where the morning light is strongest. The United States Land Office, Cheyenne Division, confirms receipt of her inquiry. The federal land grant issued to Henry James Reardon in October 1866, covering 1,200 acres, including water rights to the creek designated as Reardon's Spring, is on record as valid, uncontested, and currently held in the name of Colt Henry Reardon as sole surviving heir, transferred by standard succession in 1871. The filing of any sale document without the title holder's verified signature constitutes federal fraud. An investigator from the Cheyenne office will arrive in Harlan's Crossing within the week. The telegram is signed by the division superintendent. Ada folds it once along the original crease and puts it inside her coat against her chest, where she can feel it with every breath. She rides back to the ranch at a pace the mare has never been asked for on this road. The auction is announced by notice nailed to the door of the general store and the post office door on Thursday afternoon. The same afternoon, Ada is riding home with the telegram. By Friday morning, when she and Colt ride in together, the notice has been up for 18 hours and the whole of Harlan's Crossing knows about it. The main street is already filling when they arrive. This is not ordinary Friday commerce. The crowd has the particular density and energy of people who have gathered for something they expect to remember. Ranchers in from the outlying properties, the regular townspeople, the women who come to town only on Sundays, standing in weekday clothes with expressions that mix curiosity with the slight discomfort of an audience that has not decided yet which side it is on. Children are posted on the mercantile steps and the top rail of the water trough fence for a better vantage. Price is already there. He stands at the center of the street in front of the land office with the composed ease of a man who has arranged the furniture of this morning precisely to his specifications and is satisfied with the arrangement. Beside him, two men in Cheyenne lawyers' clothing, dark coats, papers in hand, the professional remove of men paid to stand in proximity to conflict without becoming part of it. And to Price's left, seated in a chair that has been brought outside and placed with deliberate formality, on the raised edge of the boardwalk, Judge Oldmore. Ada has not seen the judge before this moment. He is a heavy-set man in his late 50s with the complexion of someone who has spent years indoors and the elaborate stillness of a man performing impartiality rather than feeling it. His coat is good quality and recently brushed. His eyes move across the crowd with the efficiency of a man taking an inventory he has already counted. Colt brings the wagon to the rail at the far end of the street. He sets the brake. He does not move immediately. He sits looking down the length of the main road at the assembled crowd and the man at the center of it, with an expression Ada cannot fully read. Not anger, not fear. Something older and more controlled than either. The expression of a man who has known this morning was coming for a long time and has simply been waiting to find out which morning it would be. "Stay close," he says. "I intend to," Ada says. They walk down the street together. Judge Oldmore calls the proceeding to order with a single crack of the gavel against the arm of his chair, a sound that pulls the crowd into the shape of an audience and establishes in one stroke the fiction that what follows will be formal and proper and lawful. He reads the basis for the auction from a prepared document, a voluntary declaration of intent to sell, signed by the property owner, filed and recorded at the Harlan's Crossing Land Office. He names the parcel, Reardon's Spring Ranch, 1/200 acres, and the seller of record, Colt Henry Reardon. A sound moves through the crowd, not quite a murmur, the particular almost silence of a large number of people deciding simultaneously whether to speak. Price's attorney steps forward and presents the document with the unhurried confidence of a man laying down a hand he knows wins. The judge examines it with the performance of careful consideration. He nods. He opens his mouth to invite bids. Ada steps forward from the crowd. She does not raise her voice. She does not need to. The crowd is quiet and the morning is still, and she speaks at the volume of a woman accustomed to being heard in rooms that would prefer she wasn't. "Your Honor, before this proceeds, I have a document for the court's consideration." The judge's expression shifts. Not alarm, but the recalibration of a man whose stage direction has been departed from. He looks at Ada, then at Price. The look lasts exactly 1 moment too long. "Ma'am, this is a legal proceeding." "I am aware of what it is." She walks to the front and holds the telegram out to the judge at a distance that requires him to take it. He takes it. That is an official communication from the United States Land Office, Cheyenne Division, received this morning. It confirms that the federal land grant for Reardon's Spring Ranch is valid and currently held in my husband's name. It also states that the filing of any sale document without verified signature from the title holder constitutes federal fraud, and that a federal investigator is already en route to this town. The judge reads. His face does not change, but his stillness changes quality. The stillness of a man whose options are reorganizing themselves at considerable speed. Price's lead attorney leans toward his colleague. A brief, low exchange. The colleague's hand moves to the stack of papers and closes over them. This telegram raises serious questions about the validity of these proceedings, the judge begins. It necessarily does exactly what it says. Ada keeps her voice level, her hands steady, her eyes on the judge. A federal signature was forged in your jurisdiction, Your Honor. That document, she indicates the sale declaration with a slight nod, was prepared and filed by a man who has no legal appointment to the land office of this town, and whose installation you may find yourself explaining to the investigator arriving from Cheyenne. The crowd has gone entirely silent. Price steps forward then. He moves with the recovered ease of a man who has lost one position and is retreating to another, unhurried, almost graceful, as if the pivot were planned. Your Honor, I must point out that the individual presenting this material is a mail-order bride with no legal standing to represent property she does not hold in her own name, arrived in this territory less than 3 months ago from... Her name, says Colt Reardon, is Ada Crane Reardon. He has moved to stand beside her. Ada had not heard him come through the crowd. He moves quietly for a man his size, but he is there now, and the street registers his presence the way a room registers a lamp being brought into it. He removes his hat. He holds it at his side. He speaks at a volume that reaches every person on that street without appearing to try. She is my wife. That ranch has been Reardon land since my father filed the federal grant in 1866, 8 years before this man arrived in my county with a walking stick and a company name. He looks at Price with the flat, unhurried regard of a man identifying something he has been watching for a long time. Any man who questions her standing in this proceeding is questioning mine. I will address that individually, as needed, after this is finished. The two Cheyenne attorneys are now both holding their papers without presenting them. One of them is looking at the telegram the judge is still holding, with the expression of a professional who can read a situation and has read this one correctly. Price turns to the judge. Something has shifted in his bearing. Not panic, but the controlled recalibration of a man who needs one more move. Your Honor, the question of how this woman knew to send a telegram to Cheyenne, knew the precise contents of a privately filed document, is itself worth examining. Someone in this town provided her with information she had no legitimate access to. That's a fair question, says Sheriff Brandt, who has been standing at the edge of the crowd with his thumbs in his belt and the patience of a man waiting for the right moment to step into a river. He steps forward now. I'd like to hear the answer myself. Who told you what was filed in that land office, Mrs. Reardon? Ada glances at Price. No one told me what was filed. I observed the new land office occupant and inferred that something had been filed. I sent the telegram on the basis of what I found in the public newspaper archive and what I found on my own property. She pauses. However, your question about information moving from this town to interested parties is one worth pursuing, Sheriff. Mr. Price has been informed of my movements in this town on at least 2 occasions when only one person outside our ranch knew those movements in advance. The sheriff's eyes move across the crowd. They settle briefly on Ruth Alcott, who is standing at the edge of the gathering near the mercantile steps. Price follows the sheriff's gaze. He makes a small, almost involuntary calculation, the kind that happens when a man realizes he needs a witness and reaches for the nearest name without thinking through the consequences. Mrs. Alcott can confirm that I received information through proper... The street is quiet enough that the silence from Ruth Alcott's direction is audible. She does not speak. She does not deny it. She stands with her basket over her arm and she looks at the ground between her boots. And that is all. And it is enough. The crowd turns to look at her, and she does not meet a single pair of eyes. Price hears the silence. He understands what he has done. His mouth closes. Judge Oldmore sets the telegram down on the arm of his chair. He looks at Price. He looks at the 2 attorneys, who are exchanging the private language of men discussing liability. He picks up his gavel with the deliberateness of a man whose room for maneuver has reduced to a single door. He closes the proceeding. No bids are called. No transfer of title is recorded. The auction of Reardon's Spring Ranch is ended before it begins, and the judge's announcement of that ending carries the clipped efficiency of a man removing himself from the proximity of a federal investigation with what speed is still available to him. The sheriff moves to Price before the crowd has finished absorbing what happened. He does it quietly, a hand at the elbow, a word that does not reach the street. Price looks at the hand on his arm and then at the sheriff's face and makes the calculation that there is no version of the next few minutes that benefits from resistance. The two Cheyenne attorneys collect their papers and their hats and walk to their horses at the far rail without making eye contact with anyone. The crowd breaks apart the way crowds do when the event they gathered for has resolved into something they did not entirely anticipate, slowly, in clusters, with the low, particular energy of people who have a great deal to say to each other and are deciding where to start. Ada stands in the street. Her hands are steady, her face is composed. Inside her chest, her heart is moving at a rate she is grateful no one can see, because the distance between who she appeared to be in the last 10 minutes and how she is currently feeling is considerable, and she is not ready to close it in public. Colt steps beside her. He does not touch her. He stands close enough that she can feel the warmth of him on her left side, which is its own kind of steadiness. The investigator, he says. Arrives within the week, Ada says. Percy can confirm when. He nods. He turns his hat over once in his hands, a gesture she has come to recognize as the motion he makes when something has resolved that he had not let himself believe would resolve. He looks at her then, not the assessing look of the man who stood at the end of the depot platform 2 months ago and picked up her bag with the efficiency of a transaction. Something different. The look of a man who has been watching someone for a long time and has arrived finally at a conclusion he is prepared to keep. He does not say what the conclusion is. He puts his hat back on and looks down the length of the main street at the dispersing crowd and the closed land office door and the space where a judge's chair sat an hour ago. We should get back, he says. Cattle won't wait on law proceedings. Ada looks at the street, at the space where everything just changed. No, she agrees, they won't. They walk back to the wagon. Around them, Harlan's Crossing resumes its ordinary sounds, a door, a voice, the blacksmith's fire, the creak of a wagon pulling out from the far rail. The September light lies flat and clear on the packed earth of the main road. Behind them, at the edge of the mercantile steps, Ruth Alcott is still standing with her basket. She has not moved. She is looking at nothing in particular, which is what a person looks at when what they are actually looking at is the full consequence of a choice they made in a quiet room several weeks ago and believed no one would ever trace back to them. Ada does not look back. She climbs into the wagon. She faces forward. The mare knows the road home. The federal investigator from Cheyenne arrives on a Wednesday, 6 days after the auction. That wasn't. His name is Garfield Moss, a lean, deliberate man in his 50s who carries a leather satchel so full of papers it no longer closes properly, and who speaks in the measured, unhurried cadence of someone who has been doing this work long enough to know that urgency and accuracy are frequently at odds with each other. He spends 2 days in Harlan's Crossing. He visits the land office, the telegraph office, and the sheriff's holding cell where Price has been kept on the sheriff's own authority, pending federal direction. He reviews the forged sale document side by side with the original land grant Colt carries to town in its oilskin wrapper. He speaks to Percy, who has kept copies of every relevant telegram with the conscientious record-keeping of a young man who has learned that paper protects everyone. He speaks to Ada for 40 minutes in the courier office, with Foster discreetly absent, and Ada tells him everything in the order she learned it, with dates and details, which is the only way she knows how to tell anything. On the second afternoon, Moss rides out to the ranch. He and Colt walk the Spring Creek line together for an hour while Ada watches from the yard. She cannot hear what passes between them. Colt shows him the water, the pasture, the scope of the land, his boots knowing every grade and hollow of it, his hands occasionally indicating something in the distance that Moss writes down. The federal man nods frequently. He asks occasional questions that Colt answers briefly. When they come back to the yard, Moss shakes Colt's hand with both of his. He leaves for Cheyenne the following morning with Price in custody, and enough documentation to occupy a federal courtroom for the better part of a season. The case that unfolds in Cheyenne over the following weeks is larger than Price alone. The investigation that Moss opens on the basis of Ada's telegram pulls back a corner of something that had been operating quietly in Wyoming territory for the better part of 5 years. 3 other ranches, 2 in the Laramie Valley, 1 further north near the river bend, are found to have lost property through methods that bear the same structural signature as what Price attempted in Harlan's Crossing. Forged documents, installed land office proxies, judges with debts that had been carefully acquired and quietly held. 2 of the 3 lost their land before they knew what was happening. The third fought and lost anyway, because he had no federal grant and no Ada Crane writing telegrams on his behalf. The territorial governor issues a formal review of land office appointments across the 3 affected counties. Judge Oldmore is removed from his position before the month is out. Not publicly disgraced, not tried, but quietly retired with the particular haste of institutions removing the evidence of their own failures. The young man Price installed behind the land clerk desk in Harlan's Crossing is escorted back to Cheyenne by a deputy. 2 weeks after that, the white-haired man is back at his desk in the land office. Ada sees him through the window as she and Colt pass on the wagon. He is sitting exactly as she first saw him, bent slightly forward, pen in hand, the unhurried posture of a man returned to work he considers his own. He looks up as the wagon rolls past. He sees Colt. He lifts his hat from his head and holds it at his chest. Colt nods once. They drive on. Ruth Alcott's boarding house does not close. It does not fail in any sudden or dramatic way. It simply empties at a pace that cannot be attributed to any single cause and therefore cannot be argued with. Ranchers who used to stop for a meal on their way through town begin to continue past. The 2 long-term boarders who had occupied her upper rooms find other arrangements within the same month. She still opens her door at the usual hour, still keeps the parlor clean, still has the horsehair sofa and the mantel clock and the lavender scent that has always felt slightly off for this kind of country. Ada is aware of all of this the way she is aware of most things, observantly without looking for it. Ruth comes to the ranch on a Sunday in early October, unannounced. She ties her horse at the yard gate and knocks at the kitchen door at a time of morning when she knows Ada will be inside. Ada opens the door. She looks at the older woman, at the careful way she has dressed, the way her hands hold each other at her waist, the expression of a person who has spent considerable time preparing something to say and is now uncertain whether any version of it will do. "Come in," Ada says. Ruth comes in. She sits at the kitchen table. She says what she prepared to say, that she was afraid, that the debt to Price had felt unmanageable, that she told herself she was only passing along harmless information and knew while she was telling herself that it was not true. She does not ask for forgiveness directly, which Ada respects more than if she had. She asks at the end if there is any way forward. Ada pours 2 cups of coffee. She sets one in front of Ruth. "You were the only person I'd begun to trust in this town," Ada says, "and you were sending information to the man who wanted us gone. I understand why you did it. Understanding it doesn't undo it." Ruth wraps both hands around the cup. She nods. "I won't speak against you in this town," Ada says. "I won't add to what's already happening to your business, but I can't give you back what you spent." She looks at the woman across the table with the clear, unsentimental regard of someone who has made a decision she intends to live inside. "That's all I have to offer." Ruth finishes her coffee. She puts on her coat. At the door, she stops, looking out at the yard, the wide October sky, the hills going rust and amber at their ridgelines. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for," she says. "First day I saw you on that street, I thought you'd be gone in a fortnight." "Most people did," Ada says. Ruth rides back toward town. Ada watches the road until the hoofbeats fade into the ordinary sounds of the morning. The railroad engineer arrives in November, which is earlier than anyone expected. His name is Calloway, no relation to the woman in the general store, and he is a professional in the specific way of men who have built things in difficult country and have long since stopped being impressed by difficulty. He carries rolled survey maps and speaks about gradients and cubic feet per minute with the fluency of a man for whom these are the primary language of the world. He wants access to the Spring Creek for a water tower supply station on the northern extension. Not the land itself, not the deed. A right of passage agreement, a bounded corridor along the eastern creek line with defined usage volumes and a fixed annual payment to the Reardon Ranch. He quotes a figure that is fair by the standards of the territory and significantly below what the arrangement is actually worth. Colt knows the land. He knows the creek volume at its lowest summer point and its highest spring run. He knows what the extension cannot do without this water, because Ada read him the 1869 article from the Courier archive and the engineer's assessment of economic viability has not changed in 5 years. Ada knows the contracts. Her father kept an orderly library, and she had read his copy of Blackstone's commentaries twice out of boredom at 14, and found, to her own surprise, that she had retained the structure of it. She understands what a rite of passage agreement can contain and what it cannot, what language binds a railroad company to stated volumes and penalties for overuse, and what language gives them room to expand their access without renegotiation. Calloway spends 3 days at the ranch. He and Colt walk the creek on the first day. On the second day, Ada sits across the kitchen table from him with paper and a pen and a set of conditions written out in a hand that is clear and precise and entirely serious, and she goes through them one by one. Calloway argues 2 points. She concedes one and holds the other, explaining her reasoning in terms he cannot fault technically, and he knows it, and they finish the afternoon on agreed terms. On the third day, he rides back to Cheyenne with a contract that will fund the Reardon Ranch's expansion for the next decade without surrendering a single acre. Colt signs it at the kitchen table. Ada witnesses it. Calloway takes his copy and leaves his. When his horse disappears down the road, Colt sits at the table for a long time looking at the remaining copy of the contract. Ada is at the stove. The kitchen smells of coffee and wood smoke, and the first real cold of the season pressing in at the window gaps. "Your father would have done this the same way," Colt says finally. Ada looks at him over her shoulder. It is perhaps the most personal thing he has said to her in 3 months. "He would have charged more," she says. Colt looks up. Something in his face, a shift, brief and real, that she has learned to catch and hold, because it doesn't stay long. He looks back at the contract. "We'll charge more next time," he says. The photograph appears on a Tuesday with no particular occasion to explain it. Ada comes in from the hen house in the early afternoon with the egg basket on her arm, boots carrying the usual yard mud, hair pinned loose against the November wind. She sets the basket on the counter and goes to the wash basin. She is drying her hands when she notices it. The kitchen shelf, the one above the stove where she keeps the good salt crock and the 2 candle holders, and the small tin of medicinal salve that has been refilled twice since she arrived, has something new on it. A daguerreotype in a plain oval frame. Small, the size of a man's palm. 2 people. A man with Colt's jaw and a woman with dark eyes, both looking at whoever held the camera with the particular solemnity of people in 1860s photographs who understood they were making something permanent. The man's hand is at the woman's elbow. Her chin is lifted. They are standing in front of a half-built structure, the same stone foundation that is now the front wall of this house. Henry and Margaret Reardon, Ada understands, building the place their son has held for 8 years against everything that wanted to take it. She looks at the photograph for a long time. Then she looks at the shelf, at the salt crock and the candle holders and the salve tin, and now this, at the ordinary collection of things that constitute a household's daily life, arranged without ceremony into the shape of what this place has become. Colt is at the barn. She did not hear him come in. She did not hear him place the frame on the shelf. He made no announcement of it because it requires none. It is not a gesture toward the past. It is a statement about the present. His parents on the shelf of the kitchen they built, beside the things Ada uses every day, in the house where she has made her life. She belongs here. Not by law only, not by contract or correspondence or the practical necessity that brought her to a depot platform in August with $1.40 and a brass brooch. By the accumulation of mornings, by calloused hands and walked creek banks, and a telegram sent in her own name on behalf of a man who had been carrying everything alone for too long. She sets her dish towel on the counter and goes back outside. Colt is splitting wood at the block behind the barn, working with the even rhythm of a man who finds something clarifying in physical labor. He does not hear her approach over the sound of the axe, and she does not call out. She leans on the fence rail and watches him work in the pale November light. He brings the axe down, splits the round clean, sets the halves aside, picks up the next one. He looks up and finds her there. Neither of them speaks. The cold air carries the smell of cut pine and distant snow in the high hills. A pair of hawks circles on a thermal over the ridge to the north, their wingspans wide and patient against the white-grey sky. Then Ada says, I saw the photograph. Colt sets the axe head against the block. He looks at her with the direct, unhurried look she has come to understand is his version of saying everything. They'd have liked you, he says. Ada holds that for a moment. She nods once. I'll start supper, she says. She walks back toward the house. Behind her, the axe finds its rhythm again, steady, certain, the sound of a man continuing his work in a place he has no intention of leaving. The telegram arrives on a Friday, 8 days later. It comes through Percy, who rides out himself rather than sending a boy, which tells Ada, before she opens the door, that it is not ordinary correspondence. Percy hands it to Colt with the expression of a man delivering something he does not fully understand but recognizes as significant. Colt reads it. He reads it again. He gives it to Ada without explanation. The sender's line is blank. The originating office is not recorded. Percy has already checked, and the telegraph operator at the prior station on the line has no record of who brought the message in. It arrived as if from no particular place, which is a thing that requires effort to arrange. The message is 9 words. Price was not the only partner. Watch the new judge. Ada reads it twice. She looks at the blank sender line. She looks out the kitchen window at the hills to the north, at the country that has been hers for 3 months, and that she understands now she will spend the rest of her life learning. It is large and old and full of things that move in the distance before they arrive at your door. She folds the telegram and places it beside the land grant oilskin in the metal box, which now lives on the shelf in the bedroom rather than under the barn floor. Colt is watching her when she comes back to the kitchen. Someone knows what happened here, she says. Someone's been watching for longer than Price, he says. Ada looks at the fire in the stove, at the warm, ordinary light of the kitchen in the November dark, at the photograph on the shelf above. She thinks about what they have built here, and what it may still need defending, and by what means, and against what she does not yet know. Then we'll need to know more than they expect us to, she says. Colt moves to the stove. He pours 2 cups of coffee. He sets one in front of her and sits across the table, the metal box between them, the fire at their backs, the Wyoming dark pressing at every window of the house his father built, and that neither of them intends to surrender. Tell me what you know about judges, he says. Ada picks up her cup. Outside, the first snow of the season has begun to fall, quiet, unhurried, covering the yard and the creek line and the hills in the particular white silence of a country that does not wait for anyone to be ready. She begins to talk.